Hey everyone, and welcome to our asset building course using Unity AI generators. So in this course, we're going to be exploring Unity's AI-powered asset generation tools and see how they can help speed up the game development process. So we will be covering each major generator, including terrain layers, textures, materials, 2D sprites, 3D models, and sound effects, all while building a small pirate-themed scene along the way just to give us a practical application to work with. So one thing I'd like to mention before getting started is that AI generated assets aren't always perfect and are honestly more often than not imperfect. So they won't always match the quality of professionally created assets, and often you'll need to regenerate results or make small adjustments yourself. That's just completely normal. When you're learning game development, building prototypes, testing ideas, or creating smaller projects, perfection usually isn't the goal. So the ability to create usable assets in minutes instead of hours can dramatically speed up development and help you focus on building the actual game instead of worrying about the art portion of it. So by the end of this course, you'll hopefully understand what each Unity AI generator does, when to use it, maybe which ones don't work as well, and maybe will be upgraded down the road, and then most of all, how to get the most value out of these tools inside of your own projects. So just to get started in this video, one thing we should do is just get Unity AI hooked up. So in this case, all you have to do is say, I have read and agreed to the Unity Terms of Service at the top tab here that says AI. And then from here, it's going to go ahead and install some Unity packages. So there's lots of other Unity AI courses that we've done, and many of them will probably showcase various forms of generation, but this course is just made to lay out every single one that's possible, essentially. And one thing I'd like to also mention is that when we're using tools like this AI generator, it's kind of froze because it's just installing the AI packages. When we are using these, we're not unable to actually hook up an API key and use other credits, which means if we are generating assets inside of Unity AI, at least at the time of recording this course, it's going to cost you Unity AI credits. So again, it's not free to generate these credits, and you're not able to hook up an external API key to make it cheaper. So it all comes down to paying Unity for the service, and they'll just go ahead and give you X amount of credits, and it usually takes anywhere from 5 to 20 credits to generate various assets. So usually it takes 5 to 10 credits for a 2D sprite, maybe 20 credits for a 3D model, etc., etc. So here we are now after our AI has been installed, our AI package. And then of course, if nothing went wrong, after you click on the AI dropdown, it should give you a list of options. So there's an option to open the assistant. This is where you'd go if you want to ask it for a specific task. Sometimes you can ask it to generate assets inside of here, but overall, they're not going to be near as effective that I've learned. So this is just where you ask it if you want to write C# scripts, or maybe you want to ask it to check your files to see if there's any errors, something like that. Usually used for programming in my experience. So now if you want to go ahead and actually focus on generating assets, there is a tab here for generate new. And from here, this is kind of all of the options that it gives you. So you can have a 3D object, animation, material, sound, sprite, texture, and cube map. So again, you can also right click inside of your hierarchy or your project browser, and you can also do it from here. So you can go ahead and just scroll through all the options. And if there's an option to generate, it'll always be at the top after the AI package is installed, and it'll say generate audio clip instead of allowing you to manually do it. So again, you can generate all of these options here, but then if you go down to something like a script or maybe a text mesh pro, or I don't know, anything inside of shaders, you can see there's an option to not generate them. So it'd be really nice if you could generate a shader and maybe make some cool looking water, but that's just not implemented yet. Maybe at the time of viewing this course, that may have changed, but we're going to be focusing on the tools that are available. And often, the creation process is very similar across them. So once you go through this course and try working with all of them, down the road, if there's an update for other objects, the thought process and the workflow should generally be the same, assuming they don't do a huge revamp. But either way, now that the AI package is installed and we're now able to generate assets, I'll go ahead and wrap up this video. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video when we start generating our first asset. In this case, I think we're going to create our pirate-themed world, right? So I think the first logical option would be to focus on terrain. So we'll make a couple terrain layers, and then we'll just paint, a really basic map full of sand or like a beach, something like that. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video when we get started on that. Hey everyone, welcome back to our Unity AI asset creation course. And since it's the first video where we're actually be creating something, I think it's most fitting to work on our overall map first. And instead of maybe using a bunch of texture 2Ds and then a bunch of like planes and shapes, we're going to try working with Unity's built-in terrain tool. So again, if we go ahead and jump down to where it says create and then terrain layer, you can see there's options where we can actually generate a terrain layer for our project. So essentially those are the materials that you can use to paint your map very quickly and make it customizable. So again, this doesn't really work if you want to make water, for example, that's really, well, it's good water physics and reflecting, etc., etc. But again, we're going to use it to maybe make a simple beach, maybe just work with a couple. And we'll also put in just like a water placeholder for when we jump to the materials section. But either way, I'm not sure how well this is going to work, to be honest. So we're just going to go ahead and test it out and then see what happens. So the first thing we got to do is actually put a terrain inside of our map in general. So I'm going to go ahead and jump down to 3D object, select terrain, and then we can just call it my terrain. And you can see in our case here, it is quite large. So you can always go down to where it says settings here on the right side, and then you can change the size of it if you want to be bigger or smaller. So in our case, we're going to keep it pretty small because we don't really care so much about making a large terrain. All we care about is the painting feature and the actual, sorry, I went to put 10 by 10 in, and the actual terrain layers that are going to be generated by the project. So we'll go ahead and just stick it as a 10 by 10 for now. And then that brings us to our next step, which is, of course, well, what can we do with this terrain tool? So, of course, you can use the paint option. And inside the paint option, this is where we can actually color in, essentially, our map. So if we're making a pirate-themed game, we probably have a bunch of water on the outside. And then on the inside portion, we'd probably have like an island or something. So maybe I'll make it a little bit larger because there's going to be a bunch of water. But you can just do it to whatever you want. So again, I'll just maybe we'll do 15 by 15, something like that. So either way, we have an option now to actually paint our world, but if we want to paint something, we need something called a terrain layer in order to do that. Likewise, you can also create something like a tree or grass, and then you can also place that inside of your world very quickly because you can just use a paintbrush to add them instead of dragging them inside of your world over and over. But either way, what we're going to do now is figure out, well, how do we actually make a terrain layer? So first thing we're going to do is just start with a really basic water placeholder. And what we're going to do, of course, is just go to create, go to the terrain layer, and then we're going to generate that terrain layer. So I'll call it water terrain. And then we go ahead and close it. And then in this case, you'll be provided with a window whenever you want to generate an asset. Okay, and the first thing you're going to notice is that there's multiple tabs at the top. So it can give you an option to upscale. It can give you an option for sometimes like rigging if you're making a character. And then of course there's an option to change which model you're using. So again, it depends on what you're doing. But as you can see here, there are 3 models that you can go ahead and try. In this case, we're just going to stick with Nano Banana 2, but I highly encourage you to work with all 3 of them and then just figure out which one works best based on your goal at whatever goal you have in mind. In my experience, I think just that basic generic image generators like Nano Banana or OpenAI models that do image generation are just better in general because they're a lot more flexible in what you're asking for. While some of these other models can be a little bit more niche. So again, they're better for specific tasks, for example, like hard painted textures, but then sometimes it will fall short if you want something like water, right? So I guess it's something you have to test, and it depends on what your use case is. We're going to stick with Nano Banana 2. So in this case, all it's saying is put in a prompt. In our case, again, it's pretty simple. We can go ahead and just figure out, well, what is a good prompt for our water? So again, I don't think the prompt itself is going to do a lot of work here. We're just going to say seamless, stylized, tropical ocean texture, top-down view, turquoise blue water, and then I just put in subtle wave patterns because, again, we're not putting water physics inside of here. And then we'll say tileable and game ready. We can go ahead and scroll down, and then it goes ahead and asks for the count. And then it also asks for a custom seed. So again, we can just ignore all of these things. 1 count, we're not going to use a custom seed. And then here, you can actually customize what you're going to make. So in our case, we're going to use diffuse, but you can also generate a normal map and a mask map. So for example, if you want to make, again, a water texture that with physics and everything, you usually have a normal map that makes it look, have a little bit more depth to it. So either way, we're just going to go ahead and stick the diffuse right now, and then we'll go ahead and select generate. And from here, you can see that takes anywhere from 5 to 15 credits. So again, you have to fund an account in order to use the generator inside of Unity AI. So here we are after some generation. I figured I would just do a grass layer and a sand layer on top of the water one because the process is exactly the same. I'll just go ahead and put the prompts inside with the video so you can go look through them. But essentially with the sand, the prompt is the exact same. We just say tropical beach sand, warm golden sand with natural color variation, soft coastal appearance. And then for the grass, we just say stylized green grass. Natural variation, suitable for outdoor environments and game terrain. So again, if you want them to have the same art style as well, you have to make sure that you use the same vocabulary. And then each time that a terrain layer is generated, you can see that it also creates a folder with the PNG file inside of it. So again, it might get a little messy if you don't keep things organized, but each time that you generate, it'll go ahead and create a folder with supporting assets inside of it. So then before we go ahead and try painting, I figured we should go ahead and make a normal map as well and try it out. So again, the process is identical essentially. We just go down to our terrain layer. We'll call it our grass normal. So we'll make it for grass specifically. And then we'll go ahead, instead of diffuse, we'll go ahead and create a normal map. And then we'll say grass normal map, dense ground cover, subtle blade detail, seamless tileable terrain, and then just a normal map. So again, you might have to mess around with the prompts to get the actual textures that you want, but I just figured I should show you guys how to not only make the actual texture, but also a normal map that can be applied to not only the grass, but other elements. But essentially, you should probably use unique normal maps for each terrain that you're going to use. Otherwise, it might look a little bit strange. So here we are after our normal gets generated. And in this case, because it's listed under a terrain layer, what it's going to do is create a terrain layer anyways, even though it's kind of invisible since there's only a normal map to go alongside it. So in this case, we don't really care about the terrain layer that was actually created. What we do care about is going into the actual folder where it was created. And then here you can see that we can call it, instead of default, we can say that it is a normal map. Then we go ahead and save that. And then we can go ahead and put it inside of our grass terrain and then where it says normal map. But I guess we'll go ahead and wait to see the before and after. In this case, what we're going to be focusing on now is, well, seeing how they look. I expect nothing too extravagant from these AI generated features, but then, again, it's just really nice for prototyping. So again, we'll probably start with the water, and since obviously we're just painting it on, it's not really going to look like water, but it's still nice as a placeholder. So we go ahead and jump into where it says paint terrain. We'll go ahead and jump towards this paint texture. And now we can go ahead and add these layers. So I can go ahead and add the water one first, so it fills out our terrain with water. Then we can go ahead and add our grass, and then we can go ahead and add our sand as well. And there we go. Now we have this like water that acts as, you know, our entire map. And then from there, we can go ahead and paint the rest of our world. So again, we don't have to be too crazy with it. I'll just go ahead and change the brush size to maybe 2. And then we'll go ahead and get started with maybe like a little bit of a beach in the center. So again, we don't really care too much about actual shape. We'll just say that looks like a nice little island here. And then from there, oh sorry, I should have selected the terrain. You can go ahead and pick the grass, and maybe we have spots of grass that are going to be present throughout the entirety of the island. We'll make it a little bit smaller. So maybe in the center, there's just a nice little grass portion that can be included. All right, and then of course, this is just the paint feature. So now you could go ahead and jump into, maybe instead of paint texture, you can go ahead and raise and lower terrain. So again, the beach itself probably shouldn't be flush with the water. And then from here, you can see that our Z is really tall. So that probably is inside of our project settings. So where we go ahead and say that, sorry, I'm just a little blind for a second here, terrain length and width are 15, maybe we should make our terrain height proportional to that. Otherwise, it's not going to look very nice when we're trying to paint everything on. So now we can go ahead and jump into where it says raise and lower terrain. And then, of course, I'm not very well versed in using this tool, so forgive me. But then you can go ahead and just raise the terrain around the water for a start. And then we can go ahead and, yeah, smooth everything out. You might have to be careful about the water being raised, but then we can just paint over it afterwards. So again, I'll just kind of expand everything to make ourselves a nice little beach island. And then I'll cut to when it's, yeah, a little bit more filled out. So this is what I came up just after a minute or two. Obviously, I'm not the most artistic and haven't used the Unity terrain tool a ton, but overall, you can start to get an idea of how it could look just from generated textures and placeholders. So again, we have this water here, which of course is just painted on and is a nice placeholder. And then you have our sand, which looks a little bit better with a little bit high res and a lot of stuff going on inside of it. And then we have our grass, which I think overall could probably use some more work too. I think we could probably revise the prompt to maybe be less focused on the actual blades of grass itself and just focus on like dirt and the texture of dirt with green mixed in, and then put blades of grass on top of it. But either way, we can go ahead and work with this. All I did was I raised the edges of the island, and then I raised the center a little bit more. And then of course, at any point where I thought things were getting too hectic looking in terms of hills, I went ahead and jumped to where it says smooth height, and then you can smooth out the actual terrain and make it not so bumpy. So again, islands overall aren't super bumpy, so you could probably go ahead and, yeah, just revise this over and over until you get something that you like. And then also I went into the paint texture feature, and then sometimes we raise the water a little bit too high on the edges, and so I just go ahead and, just paint over the edges where it looks like the water might be painted a little bit too high. So again, it's just something we can work with. I just want to show you guys how Unity AI is able to generate textures to use inside your project. Overall, I think they do need a lot of work, but the sand one, in general, doesn't look too bad. So now we can go ahead and just add a normal to where it says normal map, and then we can see how well it changes. So again, maybe it won't make too much of a change just based on the behavior of this standalone diffuse layer on its own, but we can go ahead and add this normal layer to it as well. Then we go ahead and give it a second, and then you can see that adds a little bit of a normal layer where it looks like it made a little bit of black lines through it. So I think it was trying to add a little bit of depth to the project as a whole, but I'm not sure how much this benefits from the actual diffuse layer, or the normal map, sorry, that was created. So you go ahead and just try it on the sand as well, and then see what happens. And you can see it's just kind of the same thing. It adds these really weird layers to it, so maybe it didn't do a great job either with the actual normal map. Maybe it's a little bit too filled out, or a little bit too messy to work with. So maybe we can ask it to make it a little bit of a simpler normal map down the road. But either way, I just wanted to show you guys how we can use Unity AI to make a terrain layer and build a terrain from scratch without importing anything or knowing essentially how to make a diffuse layer from scratch, for example. So it's really cool if you're just trying to prototype a game and you just need something really quick in order to make your game look like a little bit more realistic. So yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. One thing to remember is that these tools are only going to get better over time. So again, don't get discouraged if you don't get the result that you were expecting the first time. Over the months and over the years, they'll continuously get better and better, and then eventually it'll get just very close to production level, in my opinion. But now that we have the terrain figured out, I think we're going to go ahead and jump into another type of generator. So I think we'll go ahead and jump into 3D objects and then just make some objects and props that we can place on this island. So see you then. Thank you.